The reconnaissance photographs scattered across the briefing table told a devastating story. Major General Curtis LeMay crushed his cigar between thick fingers as he studied images of Tokyo's sprawling industrial maze. Manufacturing facilities were everywhere, hidden in neighborhoods, tucked between homes, scattered through residential blocks like deadly seeds. Small workshops hummed with war production inside converted temples. Machine shops operated from wooden houses. Parts manufacturing disguised itself as ordinary family businesses. Japan's entire war machine had melted into its cities, mixed with civilians, protected by its own people. Wind conditions looked perfect over Tokyo. Cloud cover was minimal. The reconnaissance pilot's report crackled through radio static. Dense population. Cottage workshops confirmed. Thousands of small factories operating in residential zones. LeMay reached for his operations phone. 334 B-29 Superfortresses would lift off from Pacific airstrips within hours. From Guam, from Saipan, from Tinian. What nobody understood yet was how this single decision would unleash the most destructive firebombing assault in human warfare. The Pacific conflict had taught American commanders a harsh lesson. Japanese manufacturing wasn't concentrated like American industry. No massive plants like Detroit's auto factories. No giant steel mills like Pittsburgh. Instead, production was dispersed, hidden among civilian populations. Woven into the fabric of daily life. Cut those supply networks, and Japan's war capability would collapse completely. Japanese industrial organization had evolved over decades into something unique. More than half of Tokyo's military output came from tiny workshops. Most employed fewer than 30 workers. Aircraft components assembled in back rooms. Metal fabrication conducted in converted homes. Precision instruments crafted in former shrines. The massive Mitsubishi aircraft complex alone depended on over 300 separate suppliers. Each supplier scattered throughout Tokyo's metropolitan sprawl. Each one camouflaged among ordinary neighborhoods. The Boeing B-29 Superfortress represented American aviation technology at its peak. 20 tons of empty aircraft. 4 Wright R-3350 duplex Cyclone radial engines. Each engine produced 2,200 horsepower. The most expensive weapons program of the entire war. Curtis Emerson LeMay stood before weather charts showing atmospheric conditions over the Japanese home islands. His command controlled 345 operational B-29s. They sat on airfields across 3 Pacific islands. Each bomber carried 11 crew members. Each could deliver 20,000 pounds of ordnance to targets 1,500 miles distant. The B-29 program had consumed $3.7 billion, more than the Manhattan Project's atomic bomb development. Each aircraft cost more than $500,000, the equivalent of $11 million in today's currency. This represented the most expensive gamble in military aviation history. High-altitude precision bombing had failed miserably over Japan. Hit rates dropped below 5%. The jet stream winds discovered over Japanese territory could exceed 250 miles per hour at bombing altitude. Bombs scattered like leaves in a hurricane. Captain Robert McNamara analyzed these statistics from his desk at Army Air Force Statistical Control. Harvard-educated operations researcher. His mind worked in calculations and efficiency metrics. Strategic bombing was mathematics, ordnance tonnage per mission, target elimination percentages, cost per square mile of manufacturing capability destroyed. Victory or stalemate often depended on payload efficiency and target selection methodology. In Tokyo, Control Officer Ginjiro Fujihara reviewed manufacturing dispersal reports with growing anxiety. Following the Doolittle Raid of 1942, Japanese authorities had ordered critical assembly operations scattered throughout urban areas. Aircraft engine components now manufactured in Asakusa District. Electrical systems produced in Fukagawa Ward. Ball bearings fabricated in Sumida neighborhoods. Hundreds of small workshops integrated into residential blocks. The strategy specifically designed to defeat concentrated bombing attacks. It had worked against high-altitude precision raids. American B-29s flying at 30,000 feet couldn't hit large factory complexes accurately. But Fujihara's nightmare was fire. Tokyo had burned before. The Great Kanto earthquake of 1923 had demonstrated Japanese cities' vulnerability to conflagration. Now, American bombers appeared overhead almost daily. The nightmare scenario was becoming probable. Strategic bombing results through February 1945 had been catastrophically poor. The 21st Bomber Command had flown 22 missions against Japanese targets since November 1944. The Nakajima aircraft engine plant at Musashino had been attacked 7 separate times. Total damage achieved was less than 4% of facility neutralized. General Henry Hap Arnold commanded the Army Air Forces. He had invested his reputation and the future of independent air power on B-29 effectiveness. Political pressure mounted hourly. Congress questioned billions spent on superfortresses that couldn't hit their targets. The Navy argued carrier aviation was more effective than strategic bombing. The Army prepared for invasion, convinced air power alone could never force Japanese surrender. Intelligence Officer Lieutenant Colonel Robert Olds had compiled target analyses revealing the fundamental problem. Japanese weather patterns created unique challenges. Constant cloud cover obscured targets. Jet streams scattered ordnance miles from aim points. Japanese fighter interceptors had learned to exploit B-29 vulnerable moments during bomb runs. Loss rates approached 6% per mission. Unsustainable for long-term operations. At 5:35 p.m. on March 9th, the first B-29 lifted off from Northfield, Guam. This bomber had been stripped of all defensive armament except tail guns. Ammunition removed. Armor plating pulled out. Every pound of weight savings converted to additional incendiary bomb load. LeMays' tactical revolution was breathtaking in audacity. Night attack instead of daylight missions. Low altitude instead of high. 5,000 to 9,000 feet instead of 30,000. Incendiary clusters instead of high explosives. Conventional strategic bombing wisdom completely inverted. Weather forecasts indicated ideal conditions. Surface winds of 28 miles per hour would fan flames across target districts. Low humidity would accelerate fire spread. Clear skies provided excellent visibility for Pathfinder aircraft. The mathematics were devastating. Each B-29 carried 40 clusters of AN-M69 incendiary bombs. Each cluster contained 38 individual bomblets filled with napalm gel. Ignition temperature exceeded 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Burning time, approximately 6 minutes. Total incendiary load per aircraft reached 6 tons. Multiply by 334 bombers launched. The equation yielded 1,065 tons of incendiary ordnance, to be dropped on approximately 12 square miles. Tokyo's fire defenses were catastrophically inadequate. 8,000 firefighters for a city of 7 million people. 3 ladder trucks capable of reaching above 2 stories. No pressurized water systems in most residential districts. Narrow streets that would trap evacuating civilians. Wooden buildings separated by inches rather than feet. Air raid shelters virtually non-existent because government believed their construction would damage morale by suggesting Tokyo could actually be bombed. The first Pathfinder aircraft arrived over Tokyo at 12:08 a.m. on March 10th. Using radar navigation, they identified the aiming point in the Shitamachi district, the most densely populated area of the city. Lead pathfinders dropped their incendiaries in parallel lines, creating a flaming X visible from 50 miles away. Following bombers would simply aim for the burning cross, dropping their loads to expand the conflagration outward. Squadron after squadron arrived over Tokyo in a 3-hour procession. 279 B-29s reached the target area. The inferno spread exactly as operational research had predicted. Individual fires merged into area conflagration. Area conflagration escalated into firestorm. Ground-level temperatures exceeded 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Superheated air rose with such violence it created tornado-force winds at ground level, sucking oxygen from shelters, feeding fresh air to the flames. By 2 hours a.m. on March 10th, 16 square miles of Tokyo were burning. Police reports described scenes of unimaginable horror. Canals boiling from the heat. Asphalt streets melting into rivers. Glass windows liquefying and flowing like water. Metal lamp posts bending from thermal expansion. Fire department communications collapsed completely as telephone lines burned. Tail gunner Sergeant James Krantz reported his guns were unnecessary. Japanese fighters couldn't operate in the superheated air over the city. Anti-aircraft guns fell silent as their crews fled the advancing inferno. The greatest enemy was turbulence from thermal columns that could flip a 60-ton bomber like a leaf in a hurricane. Pilots reported they could smell burning flesh at 5,000 feet altitude. The devastation metrics exceeded all projections. 271 buildings eliminated. 1,005 people rendered homeless. Official death toll reached 83,793. Actual casualties likely exceeded 100,000. More people died in 6 hours than in any single military action in human history, including the atomic bombings that would follow 5 months later. 1/4 of Tokyo ceased to exist in a single night. Japanese output statistics told the story in stark numerical terms. Aircraft engine assembly in Tokyo District reduced by 75% overnight. Precision tool operations eliminated entirely in affected areas. Electronic component fabrication saw 12 major suppliers erased completely. Ball-bearing facilities lost 40% of national capability. The cascade effects rippled through entire supply chains as component suppliers vanished in flames. Reconnaissance aircraft photographed the aftermath on March 11th. Where dense urban manufacturing districts had existed 48 hours earlier, only ash fields remained. 16 square miles of scorched earth punctuated by occasional concrete structures that survived the inferno. Factory chimneys standing like grave markers over incinerated facilities. Rail yards twisted into abstract sculptures of melted steel. The psychological impact exceeded even the physical damage. Worker absenteeism skyrocketed as survivors searched for missing family members. Factory managers reported efficiency drops of 60% among traumatized workers. Military production schedules became meaningless as entire supply networks ceased to exist. The myth of divine wind protecting Japan from foreign invasion evaporated like morning mist. Intelligence intercepts revealed growing panic in Japanese command structures. Navy Ministry reports described complete breakdown of coordination. Army procurement officers reported catastrophic disruption of component delivery schedules. Munitions Ministry statistics showed irrecoverable losses to precision manufacturing capabilities. The distributed system that had protected against precision bombing proved fatally vulnerable to area incendiary attack. LeMays ordered the second wave while Tokyo still burned. On March 11th, 285 B-29s struck Nagoya, Japan's aircraft manufacturing center. The Mitsubishi Aircraft Works had dispersed operations among 300 subcontractors throughout the city. The firestorm eliminated them simultaneously. 2 square miles of manufacturing district vaporized. Aircraft assembly dropped 40% in 24 hours. March 13th brought devastation to Osaka. 274 superfortresses dropped 1,733 tons of incendiaries on Japan's second-largest city. The Osaka arsenal, producing 1/5 of Japan's ammunition, ceased to exist. 8 square miles of commercial districts reduced to ash. 744 buildings eliminated. Port facilities that handled 30% of Japan's imports burned to the waterline. March the 16th witnessed Kobe's annihilation. 331 B-29s transformed Japan's 6th-largest city into an inferno. The Kawasaki shipyards, building 1/3 of Japan's merchant vessels, burned for 3 days. The Mitsubishi and Kawanishi aircraft plants lost 60% of their capability. 7 square miles of urban area eliminated. Transportation networks connecting Western Japan to Tokyo severed completely. March 19th completed the 5-day campaign with a return to Nagoya. 290 superfortresses finished what the first raid had started. The IG Aircraft Company, producer of naval attack aircraft, lost every dispersed facility simultaneously. Residential districts housing skilled workers vaporized. Technical schools training aircraft mechanics incinerated. 3 additional square miles of capability removed from Japan's war economy. The statistics were irrefutable. In 10 days, B-29s had dropped 9,373 tons of incendiaries on Japanese cities. 42 square miles of urban area obliterated. 1.5 million people homeless. Output indices collapsed across every sector. Aircraft manufacturing down 68%. Munitions assembly down 50%. Machine tool operations down 72%. The cascade failure of interdependent networks created economic paralysis. But LeMays was just beginning. Operation Starvation launched simultaneously with the firebombing campaign. B-29s from the 313th Bombardment Wing began dropping naval mines in Japanese waters. The AN-MK-25 mine contained magnetic and acoustic sensors that made sweeping nearly impossible. 12,000 mines would eventually close every major Japanese port. Import tonnage that had already fallen 90% from submarine warfare dropped to virtually zero. Raw material shortages became critical within days. Steel required iron ore from Manchuria and Korea. No ships meant no ore. No ore meant no steel. No steel meant no weapons. Aluminum depended on bauxite from the southern resource area, cut off completely. Aviation fuel required crude oil from the Dutch East Indies. Pipelines severed. Food imports that fed workers terminated. The economy began consuming itself. The campaign expanded relentlessly through spring. On April 13th, 327 B-29s returned to Tokyo, obliterating the Arsenal District. April 15th saw 109 superfortresses eliminate Kawasaki's engine plants. May 14th brought 472 bombers to Nagoya in the largest daylight incendiary raid of the war. The systematic erasure of Japanese capabilities proceeded with mechanical efficiency. By May 25th, even secondary cities faced annihilation. Yokohama lost 6.9 square miles and 42% of its urban area in a single night. Tokyo was struck again, with an additional 16.8 square miles incinerated. The capital city that had housed 7 million people was now 50% rubble. Output from the Tokyo-Yokohama complex, which had produced 35% of Japan's war material, effectively ceased to exist. The human toll mounted beyond comprehension. Each raid produced tens of thousands of casualties. Burn victims overwhelmed medical facilities that lacked basic supplies. Malnutrition spread as food distribution networks collapsed. Disease followed as sanitation systems failed. The skilled workers essential to precision operations, men who required years of training, died by the thousands. Their loss represented knowledge that could not be replaced. By August 1945, systematic annihilation had become routine. LeMays' target list had expanded to include every city with population exceeding 30,000. 66 Japanese cities had been firebombed. 180 square miles of urban area obliterated. 21 million Japanese displaced from their homes. The foundation that had supported the world's third-largest navy and an army of 5 million had been reduced to smoking ruins. Manufacturing statistics revealed complete economic collapse. Aircraft assembly that peaked at 2,572 planes in September 1944 fell to 1,131 by July 1945. Engine fabrication dropped 75%. Propeller manufacturing down 80%. Electronic components virtually eliminated. The feedback loops accelerated geometrically. No ball bearings meant no engines. No engines meant no aircraft. No aircraft meant no defense against B-29s that arrived nightly with mechanical precision. The final statistics defied belief. Total bomb tonnage dropped, reached 147,000 tons. Total sorties flown numbered 15,000. Total B-29s lost equaled 414. Total American aircrew casualties approximately 2,600. Against these losses, Japanese casualties from strategic bombing ranged from 400,000 to 600,000 dead, with millions more injured or displaced. Tokyo alone lost more civilians in one night than Britain lost in the entire war. Prince Fumimaro Konoe's post-war testimony to American investigators was explicit. Fundamentally, the thing that brought about the determination to make peace was the prolonged bombing by the B-29s. Navy Minister Admiral Mitsumasa Yonai concurred. The B-29 was the most important single factor in causing Japan to surrender. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey concluded that Japan would have surrendered by November 1945 without invasion, without atomic bombs, based solely on conventional bombing and blockade. The technological implications revolutionized warfare. Strategic bombing had validated itself as a war-winning capability. The ability to eliminate entire economies from the air removed the need for ground invasion. The independent Air Force that General Arnold had envisioned became reality in 1947, built on the foundation of B-29 success over Japan. Every subsequent air campaign would reference the lessons of 1945. American air superiority had proved decisive. Boeing manufactured 3,170 B-29s between 1943 and 1946. Each aircraft cost $639 to $188, equivalent to $11 million in modern currency. The total program investment of $3.7 billion exceeded the Manhattan Project's $2 billion. But the return on investment was conclusive. Japan's entire foundation obliterated for the loss of 414 B-29s and 2,600 aircrew. The arithmetic of strategic warfare had been solved. The moral implications generated decades of debate. International law in 1945 did not explicitly prohibit area bombing of cities. The Hague Conventions addressed military targets, but not civilian workers. Japanese authorities had deliberately dispersed military assembly into civilian areas, making discrimination impossible. American planners argued that eliminating war production capabilities justified civilian casualties. Critics condemned the deliberate targeting of population centers as war crimes. General LeMays remained unapologetic throughout his life. "We're at war with Japan. We were attacked by Japan. Do you want to kill Japanese, or would you rather have Americans killed?" His logic was coldly practical. Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan, projected 1 million American casualties. Olympic, the invasion of Kyushu scheduled for November 1945, anticipated 250,000 casualties in the first 30 days. Coronet, the assault on Honshu planned for March 1946, expected even higher losses. Japanese planning documents captured after surrender revealed Operation Ketsugo, the defense plan that mobilized every Japanese citizen for resistance. 28 million civilians had been organized into combat units. Bamboo spears distributed to women and children. Suicide attack training for entire populations. The National Resistance Program anticipated 20 million Japanese deaths defending the homeland. Against these projections, the bombing casualties represented a fraction of invasion costs. The transformation was irreversible. Japan's vertically integrated zaibatsu conglomerates had been shattered. The distributed system that characterized Japanese operations was obliterated. Post-war reconstruction would require complete reimagination of organizational structure. The Toyota system and just-in-time manufacturing that would revolutionize global commerce decades later emerged from the ashes of 1945's devastation. Technical innovation accelerated beyond prediction. Radar navigation that guided Pathfinder aircraft to targets through complete darkness. Incendiary chemistry that created unstoppable conflagrations. Operations research that optimized bombing patterns. Command and control systems that coordinated hundreds of aircraft across thousands of miles. Electronic warfare that jammed Japanese radar and communications. Every aspect of modern air warfare traced its origins to innovations over Japan. The psychological transformation proved equally profound. The Japanese concept of Yamato Damashi, the unconquerable Japanese spirit, had been broken by technology. The divine winds that repelled Mongol invasion fleets could not stop B-29s. The warrior tradition that valued death before dishonor meant nothing against incendiary bombs. The military might that had conquered East Asia was reduced to ash in 5 months. The recognition of defeat became undeniable. Admiral Soemu Toyoda, Chief of Naval General Staff, testified, "I believe the Russian participation in the war against Japan, rather than the atom bombs, did more to hasten the surrender." But his own staff reports contradicted this claim. Naval intelligence assessments from July 1945 stated, "The enemy's bombardment is rapidly achieving its objective of eliminating our homeland's capability. Continuation of the war has become impossible." The B-29 legacy extended far beyond World War II. Strategic Air Command's nuclear deterrent doctrine emerged directly from 21st Bomber Command experience. The assumption that air power alone could determine war outcomes shaped Cold War strategy. Vietnam, Kosovo, Iraq, and Afghanistan all witnessed attempts to replicate 1945's success. The promise and limitations of strategic bombing continue to influence military planning 8 decades later. Japanese recovery required 2 decades. The Korean War from 1950 to 1953 provided crucial reconstruction demand. American occupation authorities who had overseen elimination now supervised rebuilding. The same districts incinerated in 1945 became centers of economic miracle by 1965. Toyota City rose from Nagoya's ashes. Electronics giants emerged from Tokyo's burned districts. The world's second-largest economy grew from history's most complete annihilation. Curtis LeMay was promoted to lieutenant general 2 weeks after Japan's surrender. His subsequent command of Strategic Air Command from 1948 to 1957 shaped American nuclear strategy throughout the Cold War. The same calculated logic that determined incendiary loads over Tokyo later determined nuclear targeting of Soviet cities. Mutual assured destruction descended directly from Operation Meeting House's precedent. Robert McNamara, who had analyzed bombing effectiveness for LeMay, later served as Secretary of Defense during Vietnam. In his 2003 documentary, The Fog of War, he reflected on the firebombing campaign. LeMays said, "If we'd lost the war, we'd all have been prosecuted as war criminals." And I think he's right. He and I'd say I were behaving as war criminals. The moral questions raised by the campaign against Japanese cities continue to resonate in debates about civilian casualties and proportionality in warfare. The last B-29 combat mission flew on August 14, 1945, hours before Emperor Hirohito announced surrender. 143 Superfortresses struck the Nippon Oil Company refinery at Tsuchizaki. As the bombers returned to base, radio operators received the ceasefire order. The strategic bombing campaign that had reduced Japanese capabilities by 70% was complete. The final equation was conclusive. 147,000 tons of bombs dropped. 66 cities obliterated. Economy eliminated. In the depths of Tokyo Bay, the battleship Nagato rested on the harbor bottom, sunk by American carrier aircraft. Once the pride of the Imperial Navy, her massive guns that could hurl 3 200-pound shells 25 miles had proved worthless against bombers flying from islands 1,500 miles away. The age of the battleship had ended. The era of strategic air power had begun. Economies could be eliminated from the air. Curtis LeMay and his B-29s had proved it with calculated certainty over the burning cities of Japan. The bamboo spears distributed to Japanese civilians for homeland defense were never used. They rest today in museums, relics of a war that ended not through invasion, but through systematic aerial elimination of capabilities. The B-29 had not just obliterated Japanese facilities, it had demonstrated that modern war belonged to the nation with superior technology, resources, and the strategic logic to employ them effectively. In the ashes of 66 Japanese cities, the foundation of the modern world order was established.